Have you ever asked yourself why the pain didn't go away? Even after time passed, even after you tried to be strong, even after you told yourself you were fine? What if the pain stayed? Not because you failed to heal, but because something inside you was never truly heard? Many people don't realize this, but some wounds don't fade with time. They wait for safety, they wait for understanding. And that's what we're talking about today. In this conversation, Gabor Maté explains something that quietly changes everything, that what we often call symptoms are actually survival responses, shaped by experiences we had no control over. Addiction, anxiety, emotional numbness, shame. These weren't flaws. They were adaptations to pain that came too early and stayed too long. This isn't about blaming the past, and it's not about fixing yourself. It's about finally understanding yourself with compassion. So if this speaks to something inside you, take a breath. You don't need to rush. You don't need to force healing. And if you feel comfortable, you're welcome to comment, "I am healing." This is a safe space. Your inner child matters here.
You know, one of the lines that you say in Reconnect is, you say, you're in this studio and you say, "Brian, we live in a highly traumatized society." And so I'm wondering, now that this happens, what do you see when you look out on the world the last couple months?
Well, it's interesting. I've been following some of the guests that you've had on in the last few weeks, and there's a Buddhist saying that goes that when a pickpocket sees a Buddha, all he sees is a wallet, you know. And what that means is that what we see depends so much on where we're coming from. So when you have people like Alex Jones and David, is it Ike or Ike?
Ike, yes.
Ike, okay. When you're conspiracy theorists, COVID happens, what you're going to see is conspiracy. You know, that's just how it works. Now, when you look at, same is true for me. So when you're very conscious of trauma, and so much of my work with mental and physical health has to do with the impact of trauma, when I look at COVID, of course, I'm looking at it through the lens of trauma. And so when we look at what's happening in society, for example, in England, the first 10 doctors to die of COVID were Black, Asian, what's the word, BEMA, B-E-M-A. It was Black, Asian, something else. In the United States, in the Black communities, people are dying disproportionately. Like the number of people dying in the Black communities is disproportionately higher than in the Caucasian communities. So, why is that? It's because these people are already more traumatized before the COVID comes along, so their immune system is less resistant. So what I'm saying about the COVID crisis is that it's kind of revealing certain aspects of our society that were always there, but we don't pay attention to them so much. So social isolation for me, living in my middle-class home in Vancouver, British Columbia, fairly big house, nice neighborhood. I get to go outside. I get to do my bicycle rides. I don't get to go swimming, but I get to do my bicycle ride. That's very different than from somebody living in the downtown east side of Vancouver, where the city in which I live, which is the addicted area, where people are living in one-room occupancy hotels, where in order to get their drugs, they have to go out into the street. So social isolation for them is a very different proposition than it is for me. So this crisis is revealing the traumatic fault lines in our society. And
Wow.
if you look at something like Italy, where something like 89 or 90% of the people, or 99% of the people who died had pre-existing medical conditions. Well, who are the people that have pre-existing medical conditions? They're the people that are most under stress throughout their lives. So who lives and who dies? Now, I know the virus doesn't discriminate. It'll strike anybody at whatever class or whatever economic, whatever social level, but disproportionately, it's going to select the most traumatized to victimize. So that's what I'm seeing. Now, also what I'm seeing is that I think in England, but certainly in North America, the phone calls to mental health lines are going up. Domestic violence has gone up. Anxiety, depression has gone up. Well, what's happening is that the usual ways that we can distract ourselves from our traumas are less available to us. Therefore, those traumas are more likely to show up. So that, when somebody can go to work or go to the pub or meet with their friends or buy a new pair of shoes or watch the latest Manchester Derby or the rugby team, or in the States, the baseball season or the hockey season, we have ways of distracting ourselves from our internal troubles. But now that's all coming to high relief. So I see all that when I...
Now that we've seen how trauma shapes entire societies, let's go deeper. Because trauma doesn't just live out there. It lives inside of us. And nowhere is that more visible than in the story of addiction, which Dr. Maté explains with such clarity and compassion.
Until I went to work down there. So really it dramatized and confirmed for me, made it very palpable how addictions are a response to suffering, and that what people need in response to addiction is not judgment and not simply symptom control. They need to be helped to heal from their trauma. Because it is all about trauma. The media, the television, cultural depiction of addicts is usually as desperate people, but without showing why they're desperate. So all that shows is the desperation for the drugs. There's no indication of what's driving that desperation. And hence you see them behaving in all kinds of dysfunctional ways, aggressive or manipulative or unpleasant. But again, there's no three-dimensional sense of the reality of these people as to what that's really all about for them. Is it possible to cure people? You're speaking from the Western model, where I am the expert, and you're the one with the disease, and I'm going to cure you, like you cure a piece of meat. No. The answer to that question, framed that way, is no, it's not possible. If you're asking, is it possible for people to heal from trauma sufficiently that they don't have to keep escaping into addictions to lessen the suffering of their trauma? Yes, that's entirely possible. But the question is, under what conditions is that possible? And under the conditions that obtain in London, UK, or Vancouver, British Columbia, or New York, or any place, under the conditions that obtain socially, legally, and from the perspective of medical practice, it's hardly a likelihood, because we're approaching it from the wrong direction and with the wrong perspective. If I could constantly demonstrate that with this particular population, I could affect a 5 or 10% success rate of getting people to leave their addictions behind, I'd be considered to be a genius, because our results are so poor. When I say ours, I don't mean ours specifically in Vancouver. I don't mean that. I mean the overall treatment model for addiction is so poor in succeeding with the most affected segments of the population. So, addictions are like everything else on a spectrum. So a lot of people do heal from addictions, but the most inveterate, most entrenched addicts, they have the hardest time. And they're also the ones whom society gives the hardest time, so that it makes it even harder to help them. Never mind they don't get the help they need, they actually get actively punished. And so what you've actually got is traumatized children. When children are traumatized, that affects how they feel about themselves, which is deeply ashamed, because a child always believes that it's about himself. So if I'm being hurt like this, I gotta be a terrible person. Or if I was sexually abused, why didn't I fight back? I must be a very weak person. So there's a deep sense of shame. Then there's tremendous emotional pain that accrues from abuse and neglect. Tremendous emotional pain that is hardly possible for people to bear. Now they have to soothe their pain with substances or other compulsive behaviors. Then the trauma itself, given that the human brain develops an interaction with the environment, shapes the brain circuitry in such a way that the person will be more likely to find relief from the drugs. So the very physiology of the brain is affected by early trauma. So then you take these traumatized people and you make their habit illegal. It's not illegal to drink yourself to death. It's not illegal to make yourself sick with emphysema or lung cancer by means of cigarettes, but it is illegal to use other substances. So now you take these abused, traumatized people, you place them outside the law, you put them in jails, and you hound them all their lives, treating them like criminals and bad people and failures and rejects and less than human. And then we wonder how come they don't get better. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle of taking traumatized people and then re-traumatizing them and then hoping at the same time, why don't they listen? Why don't they get better already? Why don't they give it up? Well, they don't give it up because the more hurt they are, the more they need to escape. In other words, the addiction wasn't your problem. Your problem was that you had a lot of emotional pain, you didn't know what to do with. So the addiction was really an attempt to solve a problem. So when you say, why do people use substances or why do they engage in addictions in general, it's because they have a problem they don't know what to do with. And if you really understand their addiction, we have to ask, well, what gave you so much emotional pain? And how come you didn't have the internal resources? This is not a judgment, it's simply an inquiry. How come you lacked at some point the internal resources to deal with that pain in a more creative, forward-looking way that would help you resolve the pain rather than to perpetuate it? So really what it was is that the addiction came along to help you solve a problem you had no other solutions for at the time. And that's the case for all addictions. So why do people use? Why do people engage in addictions? Because they have deep emotional problems they don't have the means to resolve on their own. That's why they use. The average medical student, until very recently, has never even heard the word trauma in their education. It doesn't show up. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about its impact on the brain, on the personality, on the emotional life of people, on its impact on people's physical health. It's not a word that we mention. We're traumaphobic. As a fellow doctor said to me, the medical profession is traumaphobic. Psychiatrists these days are trained mostly in this biological model of psychiatry where everything comes down to a biological brain disease. Here, let's give you a pill. The last thing most psychiatrists know how to talk about is actually emotional pain or its origins in human experience. You'd think they'd know how to do that, but they don't. They're not trained in it. It's not part of the predominant medical ideology. And, you know, as a physician, I can tell you, we like to think of medicals as a science, and it has certainly great scientific achievements to its credit and great scientific insights to buttress its successes. But it's as much as ideology as science. And ideology has certain hidden assumptions that are hidden from the people that believe in ideology. And so that if something is excluded by your ideology, you just won't see it. And so that you can be talking to somebody about your addiction, and the simple question, what did they do for you? And how come you're in so much emotional pain? Doesn't occur to anybody, you know, trained in the classical manner. Now, this is true not just for physicians, it's true for a lot of psychologists as well, who are more interested in solving your problems and getting you to overcome the behavior than in asking, well, okay, where does this behavior come from? And what are you still carrying inside that's making you behave that way? And how can we help you resolve what's inside you? Not just how do we help you change your behavior, but how do we help you change? Now that's what healing is. And that happens inside a person. So it's never a question of anybody curing anybody else, but we can guide people to healing if we ask the right questions. Until I went to work down there. So really it dramatized and confirmed for me, made it very palpable how addictions are a response to suffering, and that what people need in response to addiction is not judgment and not simply symptom control. They need to be helped to heal from their trauma. Because it is all about trauma. The media, the television, cultural depiction of addicts is usually as desperate people, but without showing why they're desperate. So all that shows is the desperation for the drugs. There's no indication of what's driving that desperation. And hence you see them behaving in all kinds of dysfunctional ways. Aggressive or manipulative or unpleasant. But again, there's no three-dimensional sense of the reality of these people as to what that's really all about for them. Is it possible to cure people? You're speaking from the Western model, where I am the expert, and you're the one with the disease, and I'm going to cure you, like you cure a piece of meat. You know, no. The answer to that question, framed that way, is no. It's not possible. If you're asking, is it possible for people to heal from trauma sufficiently that they don't have to keep escaping into addictions to lessen the suffering of their trauma? Yes, that's entirely possible. But the question is, under what conditions is that possible? And under the conditions that obtain in London, UK, or Vancouver, British Columbia, or New York, or any place, under the conditions that obtain socially, legally, and from the perspective of medical practice, it's hardly a likelihood, because we're approaching it from the wrong direction and with the wrong perspective. If I could constantly demonstrate that with this particular population, I could affect a 5 or 10% success rate of getting people to leave their addictions behind, I'd be considered to be a genius, because our results are so poor. When I say ours, I don't mean ours specifically in Vancouver. I don't mean that. I mean the overall treatment model.
Healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message resonated with you, know that your journey matters. Be gentle with yourself. Keep exploring and surround yourself with support. Healing takes time, and before you go, comment, "I am healing," to affirm your growth. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone. And before you go, comment, "I am healing," to